Enough adjectives to describe how I feel about Karlyn's work. So she's going to talk about some really, I think, useful things here. So please give a warm hand to Karlyn Morissette.
My name is Karlyn Morissette. I'm, I guess, the first in a long line of the bloggers that you're going to be seeing presenting here. So I'm glad to be kicking that all off. I blog on karlynmorissette.com about e-marketing, higher education, a lot of email marketing and blogging, that sort of thing. I'm also one of the primary authors, along with Kyle James, on .eduguru.com, so pretty proud of that. And my day job, I work at Dartmouth, so I guess that's an important thing to say too. I work in the development office. I'm the web producer. Prior to coming to Dartmouth about a year ago, I spent 4.5 years working in admissions. I did all their online recruiting. So without further ado, forgot my clicker. So today we're going to talk a little bit about ROI. And I'm going to tell you, I feel like I'm going to kind of be a killjoy to a certain extent, because the first couple of presentations were about all these great things that you can be doing with social media. But I want to bring it back and look at what value we're getting doing these things and how do we assess that. And I'll tell you why I'm so interested in ROI. It's a completely selfish reason. I'll admit it right up front, and it's probably going to be a selfish reason for you too. But the fact of the matter is, ROI makes you look like a golden god to the people you report to. So, okay, for example, say I'm your boss, and you come into me and say, I just sent out an email to 30,000 people. I'm going to look at you and say, so what? That tells me absolutely nothing about the success of that email. That just tells me that you put some time into sending out an email. So you might give me a little bit more information. You might say, well, 1,000 people clicked on that, the link in the email. And I'm still going to say, so what? That really doesn't tell me what they did, if that brought any value back to the organization. But if you come into my office and say, I sent out this email to 30,000 people and it garnered a return on my investment of 10,000%, which is not uncommon for email marketing, then you've got my attention, right? Because you've given me something tangible that I can take away and say, all right, I know you spent some time doing this, but you brought some value back into the institution. So before we get too far into this, I want to say I'm not one of the presenters that definitely likes to be up here talking at you guys for an hour and 15 minutes. So please, at any time, if you have questions, just shout it out, or if you want to be formal about it, raise your hand. If you have comments, same thing. And to kind of encourage that, I thought I'd start off by asking you guys some questions so that I can kind of get a sense of the people in the room. So how many people in here are primarily admissions people? Okay, a good number. Is there anyone out there that works in development or alumni relations? All right, there's a couple of us. Just general university-wide public affairs. All right, a couple. So mostly admissions people. Just good, because that's what I kind of figured it would be. Marketing. Well, my next question actually. How many people in this room, no matter what your job title, would consider themselves to be a marketer? So now everyone is on the hot seat for this next question. What's the difference between marketing and communications? Just shout out some answers. Come on, you guys are all marketers.
Two-way communication.
Two-way communication, says Kyle.
Informative versus persuasive.
Informative versus persuasive.
Two jobs instead of one job.
Two jobs instead of one job.
Two directors instead of one.
Two directors instead of one. I like that definition. I'll tell you what, though, the best definition I found for this when I was doing research for this presentation was on a website called marketingcross.com. If you've never been on it, it's just a great website. And it was actually in a post on a bulletin board. And it's this: market or communications makes marketing tactics tangible. And I'll tell you why I like this definition. Because it conveys a few things to me. Number one, marketing is not all about communication, right? It's the communications part of it that's going to make it tangible, but there's so much more that goes on in marketing. So research, planning, assessment after you've executed a strategy. But it also tells me that the communications part of marketing is really key. Obviously, why are you going to spend all this time doing research and assessment if you're not making these things tangible for your audience? And I think it's a really important distinction to make, because a lot of times I find that when people call themselves marketers, what they really need is that they're a communicator. And not that one is better than the other, but I think they're really different. When they call themselves marketers, but they're actually communicators, what often happens is they skip over really important parts of the marketing process. So here's kind of an example of that. I don't know if you guys are used to writing, but this is an actual example that takes place in my office about once a month. And someone comes to me and they say, I want to do a blog. And I get really excited, right? Because I'm a blogger, I love blogs, I think they're awesome. And I go, okay, so what do you want to write about? And they say, well, I have some information and I just want to convey it to my audience. And I start feeling a little disappointed because I'm like, well, can't you just do a web page? Why do you need a blog? And they're still very excited and they say, I want to start using new technology. And at this point, I get really disappointed because I have to tell them no. And then I develop a reputation in my office of being the anti-blogging person, which literally I have right now. What's happened here is that our person has started out with a piece of technology they want to use. But that's not the right place to start out. The place you have to start out is by setting your goals. And then you decide what type of technology you want to use. So this is kind of a really very, very generalized framework that I like to follow for marketing plans, right? And I'll tell you how this came about. The Vice President of Development at Dartmouth came to the Communications and Web team a couple months back and said, I want to integrate marketing into the organization. And she wanted to have a meeting with us to kind of discuss this. And so all of us are like, okay, well, what does that mean, integrate marketing into the organization? So my boss loves pre-meetings to actual meetings, so we had a pre-meeting, and we were discussing all the different parts of marketing. So like the 3 P's, the 4 C's, all that. And really it kind of hit me, and this analogy isn't exact by any means, but everyone in this room at some point has written a paper or an essay. And what's the process you go through when you're writing an essay? Well, in your introduction, you say what you're going to say. In your body, you say it. In your conclusion, you say what you just said. So in marketing, I kind of made a little analogy and said, all right, so in marketing, you plan what you're going to do, you do it, and then you assess what you just did. And as it turns out, that's apparently the key to all of life's problems as well. So we kind of solved that in a 40-minute meeting as well. But it's really true. Those are very simplistic steps to go through. And you'll see here, obviously, I have 4 steps instead of 3. And that's because I think the most important part, the planning, actually involves 2 pretty distinct processes. So I broke it out a little bit more. And we're going to go through each of those now. So setting goals. This, to me, is the most important part of the marketing process. Because this is where you're going to define what success looks like to you. And because, I'm an MBA, so I relate everything back to business, even though we work in nonprofits. How do your goals relate directly back to the business goals of your institution? So what are the business goals of your institution, right? The things that bring in the money. So you've got tuition dollars and you've got philanthropic gifts for most of the operating revenue of your university. These things are very important because, frankly, without operating revenue, none of us would have jobs. And I like my job, so I like doing things that bring in operating revenue to the university. Lastly, we have to make sure when we're setting our goals that it's something that can be measured, right? So what's the point of doing all this if we can't tell if we actually succeeded in our goals? So that's really kind of the most important step to me. Next, you're going to plan your communications. So this, again, could actually be broken down into 2 parts. First is actually planning what you're going to do. So I should say this. Notice in the goals section, we didn't even start talking about technology, right? We didn't start talking about medium. We just talked about what we want to achieve. So increase applications, increase philanthropic gifts. These are very broad goals that we want to achieve that relate directly back to our business goals. So when we get to our planning part, we're actually going to talk about how we're going to achieve these things, whether that be through email or blogs or social media or whatnot, or print, frankly, because most of the time you're going to find that an integrated strategy is, with all these different components, is going to be your most useful. So what is the message? What is the segmentation? Who are our audience? How does our audience want to be reached? All these are questions that you're going to ask in the planning part. But the other thing you have to consider when you start using technology in your marketing plan is technology infrastructure, right? So how are we going to do these things? So say you want to send out 30,000 emails. Do you have a tool that's going to allow you to do that? Say you want to start a blog, how are you going to do that? And I think this is an important point because what I often find happens is that there starts to be a little tip between the IT people and the marketing people. The IT people want to do everything in-house because they want to build these tools and they want to maintain them and all that. The marketing people probably know that in 90% of the circumstances, it's easier to outsource. It's not only easier, but it's also a lot cheaper. So, yay! Yay, outsourcing! So what I encourage everyone to do when they're starting to do ROI calculations to kind of drive this point home is that you also have to include your staff time in these ROI calculations. And I'll be the first to say that I hate doing this because it drops like my ROI for email from 13,000% to 7,000%. And I don't really like that too much, but you know, it's necessary. And this is just a really simple calculation you can do to figure out your hourly costs. But really, when you're deciding whether to do something in-house or outsource it, it almost becomes even easier. And I'll tell you guys a story. I first started working at Dartmouth almost a year ago today, and I found out on my second day on the job that they were sending all their email out in-house. And I about ran screaming up the hill because I knew that email was going to be one of the things that I was going to be doing at the university. So I said, all right, well, we might want to consider changing that and outsourcing it because you're going to get yourselves blacklisted. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, we were blacklisted. We were blacklisted from Yahoo and Comcast, which are two obviously pretty big email providers. And it took hours of our time to be able to try to figure out how we're going to deal with this, how do we contact them, what are we going to do to rectify this. And ultimately, we ended up outsourcing our email deliverability. So this was a hard pill to swallow for my office because we send out a lot of email, and it was going to come at a cost of between $15,000 and $30,000 in a bad economic time when we're all making budget cuts. Email's supposed to be free, isn't it? I mean, why do we have to spend $15,000 outsourcing our email? But if we really wanted to do it right, we were going to have to dedicate at least one full-time person to maintaining our in-house email. So can anyone in this room, find me a qualified IT person that's going to work for salary and benefits of $15,000 a year? That's just not going to happen. So it's cheaper for the university to outsource it, even though it's kind of a hard pill to swallow at the time. Okay, so we've got our goals. We know what we want to accomplish. We've got our communications plan. We know what we're doing, and we know how we're doing it, and all that good stuff. And now you're going to execute it. This is the easy part, right? A lot of you guys are, whether you're marketers or communicators, you're pretty good at executing these strategies. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this. There are certainly best practices for pretty much any technology, and I'm sure some of the other presenters are going to talk about them. I also definitely have my opinions as well, but we'll leave that part of the presentation. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So you send out your communication. Now it's time to assess your results, right? This is another really, really important part, and you're basically going to ask yourself 3 key questions when you're doing this. What was achieved as a direct result of my communication? Let me ask it another way. Did you meet your goal? Or did you not meet your goal? Either way. Did my conversion result in a return on my investment, both in terms of the money we spent on the program and in terms of the staff hours that we put into it? So that's another really important one. But the most important question of all, really the point of doing all of this, what can I do better next time? This is a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of people in higher education, right? I mean, we all have people we work with or I've worked with in the past that, frankly, are stubborn as all hell. And they don't want to admit that something that they came up with could possibly be improved upon. But the fact of the matter is, a marketing strategy is rarely going to hit on all marks all the time. So it's really important to take an objective look at what you've done, throw pride of authorship out the window, and really ask yourselves, how come we improve on this? What do these numbers show us? Could they be better? What can we do? So I'm just going to take a break here. We're going to start talking a lot about how you actually assess your technologies, but I want to make sure that you guys don't have any questions or comments or anything. Nothing to add? All right.
Well, this might be too too early. You might be talking about this a little bit later, but our read rates go way down in February, and so we tried to have electronic communication, and they still went way down in February. Are we going to talk about tactics to maybe increase that? Because,
my goal with this presentation is to more so give everyone a broad generalization to work with. So, we all work at different institutions. You all have different needs, you all have different audiences, so different things are going to work with you. So I didn't want to get that specific into it.
Okay. I was just looking at you better next time. I mean, that's the one thing that we're really trying to focus on.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, really taking an objective look at what's working and doing the assessment. All right. So we're about to get into a lot of numbers. I'm just going to warn you guys up front. We're going to be doing some math. I know math probably wasn't anyone's favorite subject in school, but it's really simple math. So I thought instead of just throwing ideas at you, let's take an actual example and see how we're going to do assessment on that. And I picked email marketing. Because email marketing, frankly, is one of the easiest things you can do in terms of assessment, because you've got a lot of data that's easily harvested from your users. So I kind of made this example, and all these numbers are completely made up. I literally didn't take them from anywhere, but I think they're kind of realistic, which makes it probably shouldn't use the alphabet. Set up tracking for an email that is sent out to prospects, encouraging them to fill out an online application for admissions. All right, so we know our goal with this. We want to increase applications, so that's why we're doing this email. Somewhere along the way, we decided that email marketing was at least part of this strategy. I'm really hoping they've got other stuff going on, but email's part of it. And we put some planning into it so we know, okay, we have to set up a way to measure this email. We need to know how many students filled out an online application as a direct result of receiving this email. So we're doing some advanced planning. First thing we're going to do before we start our communication at all is set up tracking. Now, we just heard a little bit about Google Analytics from Fritz, but I'm really going to encourage everyone to kind of take advantage of it because it's such a powerful tool. How many of you work at schools that are using Google Analytics? All right, so a good number of you. How many of you are working in schools that use something else? Okay, how many of you aren't sure? All right, well, that's good. So we're going to talk about two key tools in Google Analytics today. And my intention is not to show you exactly how to set these up. I more so want you to be aware that this functionality exists. If you want to learn more about how to set this stuff up, this is a great book. This is the book that taught me basically everything I know about Google Analytics. And they also have just an incredible help section on their website. And Kyle James is going to be talking more about them in his presentation too. So, two key tools, goals and the URL builder. So, first one is setting up a goal. So we're setting up a goal for our users. We want them to do something on our website. So say if you were an online store, you set up a goal that you want someone to put an item in their shopping cart and then go through the purchase procedure and ultimately make their purchase. And that purchase is their final goal. For an admissions application, it's a little bit different, right? But not really, because we want someone to go to the website, go through all the pages in our online application, however many that may be, hit submit, and get to the thank you page. So this is kind of what we have here. Google Analytics has a really cool tool where once you set up a goal, you actually have a funnel visualization that you can look at, so it makes it a little bit easier to grok. You can see in this one particularly, we had 414 students who visited our online application. Of them, 134 got to the next page of this application. So they completed page 1 and moved on to page 2. Of that, the same number got to page 3, and of that, we know that 134 actually submitted the online application and got to the thank you page. I'm sure you can all see how this would be really great information on its own, right? Because what this is telling me is that there might be something a little intimidating about the first page of my website. So I might want to go back and look at that and see if there's anything I can do to get people to fill it out more. Goals can be, I think, up to 10 steps long. You can have up to 4 of them in the system at any given time. Okay? So we've got our goal. We know what we want them to do. Next thing we have to do is figure out a way to track them from the email all the way to the website and through that goal. And Google Analytics has a really great tool for this with their URL builder, which big, long website right up there. I think you can also search for it in their help section, and that'll come up too. But this is just a really easy way to build a URL that will track your users from start to finish. So you're going to need a couple pieces of information: website URL, obviously, campaign source, campaign medium, and campaign name. Of these three, the campaign name is most important in this situation. Campaign source is basically, so say they decided on a strategy for these emails where they're going to send out more than one, which I would definitely encourage. So say they call it application emails just generally. Campaign medium, obviously, is email. Campaign name is actually what you're going to be looking for when you're looking in Google Analytics. So you want to get something really specific so that you remember what it is. So you get your URL, you put it in your email. Oops, excuse me. Started getting a cold right before I came down here, which is of course what you want to happen when you're doing a presentation. So you send out your email. You want to give it some time. You don't want to do assessment like the next day after you execute a strategy, right? So email, give it a couple weeks. So you go to Google Analytics and you navigate to the screen right here, and this is what you're going to see. It's got all your campaign names right here, right? So we've got big right arrow pointing to number 2, because that's the one that we're looking for. So what is this telling us? 358 people clicked on the link in the email, got to our online application page, right? What it doesn't tell us is that whether or not they completed it. So that's the next step. But I want to mention before we move on that Kyle has built an awesome tool for organizing these things, because you can see, I mean, I have hundreds of these things in Google Analytics and I don't always remember what they all are, even if I've given him a name. So Kyle built a tool to help me with that. So go to his website, use his tool, it's awesome. One of the great things about Google Analytics is that you can always drill down further for more information, right? So to find out our next step, how many of those people that clicked on the link actually filled out the online application, all we need to do is click on that link and we get to this screen. So this is giving us some more specific information about those people. So you can see I told you we have up to 4 goals in Google Analytics. You can see in this one they set up 3 for other things. What we're interested in is this one right here, 36.31%. That tells us that 36.31% of the students who clicked on that link completed the online application. We do some quick math, 130 people. All right, so now we know that direct result of that email, 130 people completed our online application. We're not quite done yet, we're going to do some ROI now. But I wanted to stop and see if anyone had questions about any of that.
You can track these goals because you know pieces of code on the page. Is that how that works?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to have Google Analytics installed on your pages from the store. Anyone else? No? We'll go back here first. Oh, yes?
Is there, do you have to have, the user have to have cookies enabled or any other kind of browser set up to accommodate?
I don't know, Kyle, did they have to have cookies enabled for the store? Do you know that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they got to have JavaScript, more importantly, enabled.
Okay, so Kyle says they have to have cookies and JavaScript more importantly enabled.
Is that mean you're possibly missing?
Yeah, I mean, none of this stuff, again, none of this is an exact science. We're using it to get a good idea, but Google Analytics, I mean, definitely for some of my sites that I have it installed on, it can get a little bit funky at times. Just use it as a helpful guide. Don't, use it as an end-all, be-all of everything. You had a question over here? Yeah?
What are the fees for Google Analytics?
Free. Free tool. Yeah. But I mean, the caveat to that, of course, is that they have access to all this data, so that's why they're giving it away for free. You also might want to check, if you're going to use a tool like this, what the privacy policy is at your university, because some universities are kind of uppity about that. Okay, any more questions, comments? All right. So we know now 130 people filled out our online application. Now we've got to do a little bit more math and come up with what our return on investment for that email was. And I know this seems kind of drawn out now because, you know, I'm presenting on it, but really this is a really, really quick process once you start doing it and getting in the groove of doing it. So I threw some additional numbers in here so we would have information to work with. This is all information that you would have when if you were using an external service provider for your email, which you should all be doing because we should all be outsourcing. All right? So figure out the return on investment of an email campaign that had 3,000 emails, had 358 click-throughs, resulting in 130 applications. This email took 2 hours to complete at a cost of $40 an hour staff time and $1.50 per message. So most of the time when I'm doing ROI for my email campaigns, which I do about once a month, I think is a pretty good time to do it. I actually don't do much math with this. There's a lot of really complicated ROI calculations you can get into. I would say for our purposes, all we really want to do is compare what we spent on it to what we brought in, right? So really, really simple. There's actually a great tool that I use that just allows me to plug in some data and get my marketing ROI. So it's the Marketing Today ROI calculator. I love it. It also gives like cost per response, cost per buyer, whatever. So everything below, can you guys see the text on this? Kind of? Okay. I'll read it now. Everything below the gray bar is stuff that we have to input. So we're going to need the number of pieces emailed, our total program costs, our response rate, our conversion rate, and our average profit per sale. Can anyone guess which one's going to give us a little bit of trouble? How much is an online application worth, right? I'm lucky because I work in development, so it's all about, you know, fundraising, so I have hard numbers to work with. But admissions is not quite that lucky. But it's okay because there's a solution for it. Dollarize everything, all right? So what we want to do is actually assign a dollar value to the worth of to an application. So what is it worth? What is it worth when a student submits an application to our school? This is a pretty common practice to just assign dollar values to things when you don't actually have a concrete dollar value. So it's not weird or anything. But what it allows us to do is to have a common denominator, right? So we all remember back to like elementary school math when we're adding fractions, we need some sort of common denominator to be able to do that. It's the same thing here. We're trying to compare the value that we're putting out there to the value that we're getting back. So the value we're putting out can be pretty easily calculated in terms of like what the dollar value is. Value we get back, we need to calculate it on the same terms. All right? With this, don't worry about being 100% exact when you're doing your dollar values because, you know, just don't make it ridiculous. Like you can't assign a dollar value to a blog and say, someone commented on my blog, that's worth $1 million. Well, no, it's probably not. It might be worth maybe $1 or $2, whatever you decide to calculate it as. But for an application, it's actually pretty easy, right? Because admissions offices, for the most part, know what the conversion rate is from an applicant to an enrolled student, right? You guys have like all 3-year rolling averages. So we can do a little bit of math, and I completely made these numbers up. We can do a little bit of math and figure that out. So cost of tuition, $20,000 a year. What is your average conversion rate from application to enroll? 20%, let's say. 20% of $20,000 is $4,000. So that's your average profit per sale. Pretty easy, right? It can get a little bit more complicated if you're doing like an attendance at an event or something. So what is your average conversion rate from attendance of that event to application to enroll, whatever. But a little bit of math is all it really takes. Does anyone have questions about that concept? Does that seem pretty, yeah?
In the Google Analytics, would actually give you the emails, the 137 emails that actually responded affirmatively? Or
Well,
you just have the numerical number?
we just have a numerical number in Google Analytics. However, in most email service providers, you can export the actual names of the people who clicked on that link. So you can just do some comparisons and see which ones actually completed the application. That's actually a really good point. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more later in the presentation. Yeah, way back.
What do you mean by conversion rate? What I use conversion rate is how many people convert into students.
So conversion rate in terms of what I have on this slide, or conversion rate in terms of the ROI calculator?
Oh, in terms of this slide.
In terms of that, I'm saying, and well, your conversion rate could be application to enroll. It could be from like inquiry to application, however many, whatever percentage that may be.
So what you're saying is 20% of students who apply.
Yeah, they showed up on a resume. Kind of 3-year rolling average of that. You don't want to take like just 1 year. Okay, all set? So now we've got the values for our calculator, right? We've got our number of pieces, it's 3,000. We've got our total program cost at a grand total of $125. We've got our response rate of 11.93%. We've got our conversion rate, which we already got from Google Analytics, so we didn't even have to do any math on this. 36.31%. Average profit per sale of $4,000. Anyone want to take a guess at what our ROI is going to be for this? Seriously, what do you guys think? Of any guesses? There are no wrong answers, guys. It's all right. All right. So we plug in all those numbers and we get an ROI of 400,000, 15%. That's a little ridiculous. Obviously, it's an extremely high ROI. With these numbers, it's not an unrealistic thing, right? Because you've got people doing a really high value action, and our calculation for that action is, pretty accurate. But don't expect to get 400,000% ROI for everything you do. Typically, when I do email marketing, I get between 7,000 and 10,000%. Average profit per sale about $250, just depending. So this is one of those things where, it's good, but don't get your hopes up about everything else. So we've got our ROI, we've done our campaign, and now the most important part of this is to share your successes, right? So if you're doing all this work, you don't want to just keep it in a bunch of binders in your office. You want to tell people about it. And this does a couple things. One, it adds credibility to you and your program because you're putting all this effort in and you're getting amazing results back. One of the things ROI does is it makes these numbers very tangible for people. So people that have no idea what email marketing is, never done it in their lives, they're going to understand an ROI of 415,000%, right? You got to give it context. You got to say, obviously ROI of 415,000% is good, but what is it in relation to what you did the month before or other emails that you've done in this variety? So give it context for people if they don't understand exactly what you're doing. And the most important part is to offer recommendations, right? Because at this point, you've just delivered really, really, really stellar news. So it's the perfect time to say, okay, I did this, I gave you this much value. This is what I think we should be doing. Because you've given really good news, so people are going to be really receptive at this point to hearing what you want to do. I do a monthly email report at Dermot. It's usually pretty good news, so I always offer one or two recommendations on what we could do better next time. And usually people are like, okay, yeah, let's go do that. It's a little bit different context than if I did it within just a meeting randomly. So that's kind of the whole gist of how you do assessment. We're going to get into breaking down some other tactics, but again, just want to come back to you guys. Any questions about any of this process, anything that I've done, any comments? Yep.
I just really be careful coming up with a calculation saying that tuition is profit.
Yeah, and again, I did this really simplistically for this. I definitely agree with you that it's problematic. It's not necessarily profit. How much are we giving out financial aid, that sort of thing. And none of this is profit, right? We're also nonprofit institutions. But it's just a matter of we are bringing in value by doing this. We are creating value by getting people to apply online or do whatever. So you don't have to do it exactly as I calculated it there, but
I think your context is going to be a great argument. To be able to show the growth and just the idea of being able to take tuition and divide that out.
yeah.
I think would be really
Yeah. question over here somewhere? No, you're changing your mind. Oh, way in the back.
How do you take into account the other kinds of things that you do, like brand building campaigns? You talked about results that are directly attributable to this one event. And there are so many other things that also impact results.
Yeah. It's not a pure science, exactly. Someone just said right here. It's not a pure science. And it's hard to calculate these things, in branding into these things, because what is your brand worth? I mean, all of your marketing tactics play off of each other. So it's rarely going to be that one email that got the students to apply, right? You guys have probably been working those students for years before they decided to fill out an application. It's that one email that was the trigger to do it, but we can't give all the credit to that email. And I definitely acknowledge that. But at the same time, it was that the email was the trigger. So that trigger, I think, is just as important as anything else. And again, that's where it comes back to giving it context. So if you could say, we started this integrated branding campaign X number of years ago, and now we're seeing these results. It just adds, it's a much richer picture. Anything else? All right. So we're going to start getting into breaking down some other tactics right now, how you can apply these concepts to like blogs or whatever. But I wanted to share with you guys what I think kind of the dirty little secret of being an email or an e-marketer is. And you might have already guessed it based on my steps of marketing, and it's this. Marketing on the web, and people might argue with me about this, marketing on the web is no different than marketing over any other medium. People can get kind of intimidated by it because they don't understand it. They don't understand these technologies. They haven't used them all their lives like I have. They don't understand what they're good for. So they kind of get intimidated and they say, oh, well, I'm just not going to do it because it's so different from what you've already been doing. But it's really not. You're setting your goals, you're planning your communications, you're executing it, and you're assessing your results. And that's just what you do for pretty much everything you go into. I'm going to tell you another secret because I think it's another thing to do with that intimidation factor, is that there's no playbook for this stuff, guys. Or there's a little bit more of a playbook than there was like 5 years ago. But by and large, a lot of people like me are making this up as we go along. And I'll be the first to say that. It's okay to make stuff up as you go. As long as you're doing your assessment process and you're really being honest with yourself and saying, all right, well, maybe that idea that I had out the bar at 3 a.m. wasn't the best idea that I could have integrated into my marketing program. You might have your best idea at the bar at 3 a.m. though, too. You just have to be honest with yourself. There's plenty of room to wiggle around and play with these things. Don't be afraid to fail, because at some point, one of our strategies is going to fail. It's just how it works. So that's kind of my caveat to all this. So I thought it might be helpful to break down some of that intimidation would be to go through a couple of really popular tactics, or things that I wish were more popular, and really talk about what they're good for, so that we know when we set goals, what are the tactics that we can use to achieve those goals. I just want to say a few more words about email marketing. So we didn't really talk about what it's good for. Email marketing is pretty much one of the highest ROI things that you can do. It's still extremely relevant. There's a lot of people that said that email is dead, and I would take issue with that, especially with prospective students. They all have email accounts. What do they need to sign up for a Facebook account? What do they use to sign into their Facebook account? They use an email account. And we're colleges, and they don't want to talk to us on Facebook. They want to talk to us over email because we're a business contact for them. All right, so it's really transactional. Same with alumni. And I'll tell you what, too, with alumni, there's not really, in my experience, an age differentiator with email. They're all using it. They're all reading it. They just might be responding to it. So, for example, what we see for older alums is actually that they will have a really high open rate, but they won't give their gift online. They'll call us up and give their gift, or they'll send a check, but they're still doing it because of that email. So what's it good for? Very transactional based. Increase online applications. Get people to register for an event. Bring in online gifts. Start a conversation is one that I've been kind of playing around with lately. It goes back to something this gentleman said over here. is that, all right, so we send out this email to get people to apply online. We can figure out all the students that clicked on that link but didn't actually fill out the application, right? Wouldn't it be cool if those students, within like a couple days of clicking on that link, got a phone call just coincidentally from their admissions counselor saying, hey, Johnny Jones, have you thought about applying? Let me give you the link to our application and walk you through it. So it can be really a trigger point to starting a conversation with people because you know what they're doing. Oh, excuse me. All right. Next one, Facebook ads. I feel like Chris kind of stole my thunder because he just talked about how bad Facebook ads are. But I think they're awesome. And I'm not talking about the big banner ads. I'm talking about these little ads that pop up in the corner of your Facebook page. Has everyone seen these? All right. Basically, you get like 25 characters in the subject line. You get like a little picture, and you get 125 characters, I think, in the copy. You can say, well, Facebook has kind of some stupid rules about what you can't say in these ads, but you can say pretty much what you want. Dartmouth uses these in their development office for our alumni. And it's great because you can send out really targeted messages to people that, you know, is based on their interests. So say you work in an admissions office and you want to do an event in Boston. You want to target all high schoolers in Boston to come to this event. So when you're setting up your Facebook ad, you go in and say, I want all high schoolers in Boston, based on the information they have given Facebook, to see this ad when they're on Facebook. Now, admittedly, it's not an exact science. People put fake information into these things all the time. But the other great thing about these ads is that you do not pay for them unless they click on the link and go to your website. All right, they're all pay-per-click. And that's really important for advertising because advertising is you're not going to get a high conversion rate from people who see the ad to people who actually do what you want them to do. It's more for awareness and for visibility. So I would never recommend using a Facebook ad like by itself, but obviously send out your event invitation, your print one, send out an email, and then use maybe the sneak imagery you're using on those in your Facebook ad. Just adds like an extra dimension, an extra layer. Typically, does anyone else do these? All right, can someone share their experience with these ads? Is it good? Yeah.
We opened a Starbucks, an actual branch of Starbucks on campus,
yeah.
And we used the ads to tell our students that it was coming. This was the grand opening because it happened in the summer.
Yeah.
And tremendous response.
Yeah. So you guys can hear. I said that they opened a Starbucks on campus and they used these ads to tell them that they were coming. Tremendous response. So it's great for stuff like that. Yeah?
Yeah, for our on-campus students, so we target right to people who are on our network. We've got our seniors sign up for our alumni network.
Exactly. On-campus students. I think that's a great way to use them. In the development office, we run a phone bank with current students, and we use that. We use Facebook ads this year to get them to apply to be part of the phone bank. And I think we got like the highest response ever in terms of applications to the phone bank. Another point with that series of ads that I want to make is that typically when I do Facebook ads, I'm seeing a response rate of like 100% or 500% people who actually click on the ad. When I did the ad geared towards current students, it was a response. I had like almost a 1% response rate on one of those ads. I about fell off my chair. And kind of deduced that the secret of that ad was that there was a hot girl in the picture. So hot girls in your ads apparently works with both men and women, so that's maybe a great strategy to use in the picture. We also found that like using exciting things in your picture, like fire, also produces a really high response rate. Anyway, you gotta grab their attention. It's like Facebook, right? So we know what they're good for. They're good for creating awareness about what you want to do. They're good for targeting a really specific audience about what you want to do. How are we going to measure that? Well, it's actually really, really easy. There are a couple tactics you can take. I would actually recommend doing both. But use a Google Analytics URL. When the person clicks on the ad, have them go to the Google Analytics URL to whatever page you want to send them to. I would also recommend setting up a unique landing page for this. My just be another way to track it. And then assign a value to whatever action this student took and use the ROI calculator. Now again, going back to some concerns we had about assigning value, it's not an exact science, but just try to use a realistic number and be prepared to justify that number for your boss if they ask about it, because if they're a good boss, they probably will ask about it. And there you go. So this is just the values that you would use for your ROI calculator. So actually, let me click anyway. So the number of pieces, total number of impressions on the ad. Facebook gives you a limited amount of tracking, so you can see how many people actually saw this ad. Program costs, total amount paid for the ad plus staff time. Staff time, it takes me about literally 5 minutes to get one of these ads up and running, so it's really not a big deal for this one. Response rate, people who clicked on the ad. Conversion rate, the percent of people who actually fulfilled your call to action. So if you're doing these ads, I suspect or would hope that you're actually asking them to do something. You're not just doing these ads just to do them, although we do that in Dartmouth too with a limited amount of success. But average profit per sale, the value you assign for them fulfilling this action. I will say I've always gotten a return on investment on my Facebook ads. They're really, really cheap to do. You bid on a price that you're going to pay per click, so I don't know that I've ever gone higher than $1 per click, and Facebook adjusts that rate. You kind of say, okay, I'm willing to pay a maximum of 55 cents for this, and they'll adjust that rate based on what other people are paying to target your audience at the time. Another great thing about these ads is that do tests with these ads so you can find out what types of pictures work best with your audience, what types of headlines, because if you run a bunch of these things at one time, Facebook has some sort of algorithm that they'll start running the one that's working more, right? Because if more people are clicking on the ad, they make more money. But the bonus for you is that if more people are clicking on your popular ads, that's the one that's going to run more. So it's a really good technique. So this is our, again, made up numbers. I kind of said, we had 30,000 views on an ad, total program cost of $42. Response rate, 300%. Conversion rate, maybe 30%. So 30% of the people who got to our landing page filled out our form or did whatever we asked them to do. Average profit per sale of $100, completely arbitrary in this case. And it spits out all my numbers, and I found out I said 100% ROI, which is, nothing to be ashamed of.
Would you say that's a pretty realistic example for Facebook?
Yeah, these numbers aren't quite that arbitrary. I actually pulled these numbers off of ads that I've run before. So, but again, it's all relative. The longer you run a Facebook ad, the less percent you're going to get on it. So, yeah.
If you put up multiple versions of an ad, Facebook, through algorithms, places the one that is getting the most success.
Yeah. Well, it's going to place all of them, but it's going to what you do is you set up all the ads within a specific campaign. So it's grouping all these ads together, and it's going to look and see, okay, which one is getting the most clicks, and it's going to start running that specific one more frequently.
So it starts as a random sort of situation.
Yeah. And if they're all working equally well, then they all get run an equal amount of time.
So it will distort the evaluation you're trying to do down the street, right?
Say that one more time?
It'll distort if you're trying to track how many ads went to your, or which ads show, more hits on your unique landing page.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be able to do that just up to Facebook has already changed the 50% of the ads.
Well,
What you do get, basically, Facebook is running on, it's telling you how much more effective their ones are.
yeah, it'll show you all their click-through rates right next to each other. You can also see how many times they've actually been viewed on the page, what their total conversion rate is, how much you're actually paying for them. So it gives you a limited amount of data about all your ads. And if you're combining it with Google Analytics, then you're going to know pretty specifically what ads are driving actual conversions on your
bit about the bidding on like how much you are willing to pay is how high it's positioned on the Facebook?
Let me get that.
How it works? The one after that.
Okay, so you can see when you actually get to select your dollar value, Facebook's going to kind of give you a suggestion, right? It's going to say for the audience that you're targeting, people are paying, between 60 and 70 cents to try to reach that audience. So you can make your own decisions about how much you want to pay, like have your maximum bid be. But like I said, Facebook will actually adjust that automatically just based on the changes in who's actually targeting that audience. So I might say my max is 65 cents, but really I might only end up paying like 30 cents per click, just on average. Another thing they do is that if you have a specific budget you have to stick to, you can set that max daily budget. So in this case, I said, I'll bid 65 cents a click, but I don't want to pay any more than 25 bucks a day for this. I don't know that I've ever reached that max budget, maybe once or twice, but if I do, then Facebook will just, throttle the ad and not run it anymore.
So where is it located? Like, is it just every time the student clicks, like, it's usually on the home section?
Yeah,
and it just rotates with the other?
Yeah, exactly. It's located on the right-hand side of the page.
Right.
So they might not even see it, but they might.
So there could be hundreds and hundreds of others.
Well, they run them 2 ads at a time, so it's not like they're viewing it like within, hundreds of other ads, but. Okay. All right, blogging. We're going to kind of get into a bit more subjective things now. We're going to talk about blogs and the social media. And with stuff like this, it's really, really important to do some sort of ROI, right? Because you're trying to sell these things to administrators who have never blogged before, blog. That's what the young kids do. That doesn't mean anything to me, right? But you guys all know as well as I do that blogging, social media, is really, really effective. Not just in terms of like building community, but I think that you can actually relate it back to more concrete ideas as well. So these things are really important to do ROI on. So blogs, what are they good for? Providing authentic stories and student experience. I hate the term Web 2.0, but I think if it's done anything for our industry, it's required us to really provide a more authentic experience to our prospects. Because they're going on Facebook, they're going on to message boards, they're talking to current students at our school, and they're getting what the real deal is. So if we can provide authentic stories on our website, I think it gives us a little bit more credibility. And the same thing with alums. Alums, I've found in my year in development, are sometimes way more uppity than prospective students ever could imagine to be. So they're going to call you out if you're not providing authentic stories. They're going to say, no, this is what it's like there. I went there. I know what this is. And they're going to leave a comment for you if you allow them to do that. So it's really important. An opportunity for interaction with current students, for both alumni and prospective students. So I think that's, the more engaged you can get these audiences with your institution, the more affinity they have for your institution, the more likely they are to submit an online application or give a gift to the school. So again, all going back to those business goals. Make institutional announcements or calls to action. I think most of the time when we talk about blogs, we're talking about journals, right? But they're really good for other stuff. And I kind of did an experiment with a blog when I still worked in admissions, where I said, okay, I want to do a blog just geared towards students that have paid their deposit, but have not yet arrived on campus. So it ran between like June and August. And I wanted to update it every single day with different announcements or factoids or new student profiles or anything that would be applicable to these students to keep them engaged over the summer so that they didn't sugar off, right? Because I used to work in a military school and kids would get cold feet and they'd get scared and they wouldn't enroll. And that meant lack of tuition dollars at the school. So I did that, and it was awesome, and people loved this, right? They went to this blog every single day. There was a total audience for this blog of about 600 students because that was the total number of the new class. Between June and August, there were well over 20,000 views for this blog. So people were coming back to it every single day and just checking and seeing what the new announcement was. Now, another thing this is good for, which is so often overlooked, is this increased efficiency within the admissions office, right? because you've got less phone calls coming in because you're making all your announcements in this blog. And that frees up your admissions staff who are, very overworked as it is to do other things because they're not handling that. Lastly, never underestimate the ability to gain insight into the minds of your audience. That can help you with your segmentation strategy. You start to know what they care about, that sort of thing. So how do you assign value to these things? With social media, it's all about, creating a community and that sort of thing. But I also think we should never be afraid to have calls to action, right? So what do we want them to do? What is the next step for them? All right, you read this announcement. What are you going to do now? What's next? So have calls to action there. Don't do it every day, but that's easily measured. Readers. How many people are reading your blog? And what's your cost of advertising and similar content medium? Or again, you can assign a value to it, but this will give you some ideas of how to kind of establish that value. Comments, cost of a focus group, if you've got a really engaged community, can provide you a lot of insight into what your audience actually thinks. Lastly, anecdotal. I think some people in here who've read me for a while know that I have a real problem with anecdotal evidence. I think it's used way too much because usually when you're getting anecdotal evidence, you've really got a really great experience or a really bad experience, and a lot of times it's more common use. It's more commonly in between. So take it on a case-by-case basis. If you're getting a lot of really great feedback across the board, that's fine. But if you're just getting one or two comments, I would say, pass it along to the people who are in charge of these things and helping you do it. But don't do ROI based on it because you really can't make broad generalizations based off of that, right? So any questions about blogs or comments or, yeah?
Where was your blog located and how did you advertise?
Well, it's located on the main university website. I think we had a link to it. I think we actually had a link to it on the homepage, which is obviously really prominent. We also have links to it on the admissions pages, and basically we promoted the crap out of it in email. So again, use integrated tactics. If you've got all this stuff up, but you're not promoting it, I think Chris made a really good point when he said that being part of the community and commenting on other people's blogs is a great way to drive traffic back to your own. But another thing is just direct marketing. Ask people to go to it, and they'll go. Yeah.
I'm having this problem getting started with blogs because of the fear that the university has. Somebody saying something bad, and then I guess I'm just struggling with, do I have to put up like the first time you come to like the blog page, the whole like, this is really not us, this is the, all the sort of legal stuff, and is that an inhibition to people or a disincentive to actually read it or to get involved with it?
I think pretty much every school that has ever tried to do blogging has run into the same problem you have. Just getting buy-in from administrators, them being scared of it, them not understanding that they can control it, that we can moderate comments, that we don't even have to have comments at all. So I wouldn't recommend that, but frankly, you have that option. I fought for about a year when I worked in admissions to get blogs on our website. I'm still fighting in development to start integrating blogs into our marketing plan in a way that makes sense. So it's higher education, it's about baby steps. Yeah?
One of the tactics for that is to try to explain to your administration that all the stuff that they're afraid people are going to say about you is already here, is being said already, and you have not only no control of it, but no knowledge of it, and no participation in dialogue.
Yeah.
So you just have to go out there, like do the search for Google stuff to go see all the stuff they're saying. There's a million ways to find out all the stuff that people are saying about you that's negative. And if you show them that that's happening already, the fear level goes down because all of a sudden they realize, oh, it's not. It really helps.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I was actually at kind of an internal Dartmouth conference last week, and we have a business professor that presented, and he made a really great point. A lot of people are saying in Web 2.0, we've lost control. but you haven't lost control. You still have the ability to get your message out there. And institutional blog may be the way you choose to exercise your level of control. You can't control what other people are saying on unofficial mediums. You can control what you're doing. Rachel.
The other thing that helped me was to remind them of the 1% rule. Only 1% of people are actually going to take advantage of it and create problems.
Right. So her comment is that only 1% of people are going to take advantage of it and actually create problems. So it's good to remind them of that. Yeah?
You talked about outsourcing email. Currently, our blog is being hosted by an outside company, but it doesn't allow for comments and it doesn't have, frankly, the flexibility that we would like it to have. What are people doing? What's the best way to have a blog? Do you host it yourself? Do you do it internally?
I would say, TypePad is a great alternative to that. Also, obviously, WordPress. WordPress is also great. There are lots of free ways to do it, but definitely those two options are really great. I want to get through just the rest of the social media part of this, so I'm going to just ask you guys to defer some of your questions, because Brad J. Ward made a special request that I cover social networks when I asked what people wanted me to talk about, so I gotta do them solid and do it. Social networks. So, what are they good for? And I'm sure a lot of people in here probably have a lot of ideas. I'm just going to throw out a few. So, never underestimate, allowing people to be a fan or a friend or follower of your institution. It's a vanity thing. Obviously, they're probably not going to your Facebook page every day, but the fact that they can become a fan of you means something to them. Also, it's an easy way for you to disseminate information to them, right? So, you're getting some value out of that, too. Engaging students over the summer to prevent summer sugar off. I think building a NIG network for students that chose to enroll or have submitted their deposit but haven't actually arrived on campus is probably one of the best things you can do. Because not only does it give them a way to engage with you and the staff at your university, it gives them a way to engage with each other. And if they start building those relationships before they ever step onto campus, how much more likely are they to actually show up on arrival day instead of getting cold feet and not actually making it all the way to campus? Lastly, whether we work in admissions or development or wherever, we're probably dealing with alumni volunteers on some level. And I'll tell you one of the things we're talking about doing at Dartmouth right now is creating a NIG network for our alumni volunteers to allow them to share experiences about what works for them, make them more successful. So obviously our office will be more successful as a result. Started doing the same thing when I worked in admissions before I left. These are really engaged alumni, and they want to talk to each other. So give them a way to do it, and hopefully the whole will be more successful than the sum of its parts. It's also, again, a really easy way for you to disseminate information to them if you've got them all engaged on a network. Yeah,
Quick question about NIGs. Do they need a lot of, like an outside party to? Do NIGs need a lot of outside management? So is it once it gets going by itself, or there still needs to be somebody in there kind of making sure people are adding to it?
I would say at first you're going to need someone to get them going, because they're not really going to understand what it is at first, frankly. You don't really understand how cool it is until you get involved in it, right? So it's going to need someone at first. I think once you've got an engaged community, you can kind of let them on their own. Also, I would also recommend doing these as closed networks. So in NIG, you have the ability to have your network closed off to people you don't want in it. So you can just invite your alumni volunteers or invite your enrolled students, so you don't have anyone else involved. All right. So how are you going to start measuring this stuff? Well, easy dissemination of information. What would it cost you to do it over another medium? How many more phone calls are you getting in your office that are taking up your staff time because you're not disseminating this information in another way? Ease summer sugar off? The percentage of, well, this might be a little bit hard to kind of calculate, but if you've got a NIG network up, you know which students are involved in that network. You're going to know their names. So did those students actually show up on campus at a higher rate than students who decided not to come? And what's the value of that? Support alumni volunteers, were they more successful? Were the people that were engaged in this network more successful as a result of having this network to talk to each other? And what value does that translate into? So, I'm running out of battery power, which is good because I'm almost done. Bottom line on measurement, how much did achieving my goals relate directly back to the bottom line of my institution? It's all about, value guys. How much are you bringing back in based on what you're putting out? And key takeaways for this presentation, if you take nothing else away, I want you to take these 4 points. Never, ever, ever start with a piece of technology you want to use. Start with your goals. And then, if you want to work technology into that, figure out where you can, but it should always start based on the goals. Measure everything. A lot of people will throw their hands up and say, we can't measure social media. I call BS on that. I think you can measure social media. You might not be 100% perfect all the time, but you can try. Dollarize everything, and always ask what you can do better next time. That's really the point of all this. And that's it. So, questions, comments, whatever. Yeah, way back.
2 questions. The first one is, do you know a good book that will help us, help guide us in establishing and setting up baselines?
Do I know of a good book that will do that?
Yeah, we're just going to, practice steps to establish baselines.
I would almost say that's something that you want to do on your own, right? Because your audience is unique to you, and their needs are unique in relation to you. So I would say, start collecting data, and that's how you're going to establish your baselines. And just look at trends.
Second question is, do you know a good book on analyzing and communicating analytics? And what is...
I think Kyle's going to give a presentation on that, actually. No, I don't know the book about that. I'm sure, come to Kyle's session, and I'm sure he'll have plenty of recommendations for you. Oh, he's holding up something right now.
That one. I'll talk about that tomorrow.
All right. Other questions? You guys all had questions like this. All right. Well, thank you. This is my Thank you.
Wonderful presentation. Lots and lots of good stuff. We're going to take a break.